I had maybe 3 minutes before the toast, and the trigger pull happened in the same breath. My fingers trembled as I tore the corner off a guest check, the paper so thin it might have been tissue. Around me, the skyline vault pulsed with that particular frequency only money makes baccarat crystal kissing bone china, champagne corks releasing like whispered confessions, the rustle of Hermes scarves against calfskin booth cushions. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass, Chicago's December night pressed against the windows, all ice and wind and darkness. But inside, the air was thick, humid with perfume and power, suffocating. I moved toward table one like I was walking the plank. Kang Tae-jun sat with his back to the skyline, the city spread behind him like a kingdom he already owned. He looked sculpted rather than born angular jaw. Black hair swept back with the kind of precision that suggested violence beneath the polish. A charcoal suit that cost more than my sister's entire tuition payment. His hand rested beside his whiskey glass, fingers tapping out some internal countdown. Next to him, Linda Zhang leaned close, murmuring something that made her smile. All white teeth and calculated warmth. Her emerald drop earrings caught the candlelight, scattering green fire across the white linen. She looked like a woman planning her wedding. She was planning his funeral. 15 minutes earlier, I'd been in the VIP pantry reaching for a bottle of Dom Perignon when I heard her voice, low and lethal, slicing through the refrigerated air. The pantry wasn't really a pantry, it was a climate-controlled vault behind the kitchen, all brushed steel and backlit glass shelving that made the champagne bottles glow like captured stars. I'd been threading between the Cristal and the Krug when her words stopped me cold. The hitmen are in the service elevator. Do it when he toasts. English, clean, American. No accent to hide behind. I froze between a magnum of Bollinger and a case of Moet, my hand still reaching, my breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. A pause. Then her voice again, colder now. Transactional. 1 covering the main entrance. 2 stationed near the kitchen pass. The 4th has the angle from the bar. I should have coughed, dropped something, announced myself like the professional server I was supposed to be. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, listening to a woman coordinate murder with the same tone she'd used to order the butter-poached lobster. When he raises his glass, she continued, you'll have maybe 2 seconds before security reacts. Make them count. Heels clicked against the polished concrete floor, sharp, purposeful, moving toward the exit. I pressed myself against the refrigerated shelving, praying the shadows and champagne bottles would swallow me whole. Through gaps between vintages, I caught a flash of her tall, elegant, wrapped in a cream silk dress that probably cost more than my car, dark hair coiled at her nape, those emerald earrings glinting like a serpent's eyes. Linda Zhang, socialite, philanthropist, fiancée to the most dangerous man in Chicago's underworld. Murderer. She swept past without seeing me, leaving behind a trail of jasmine perfume that now smelled like a wreath at a wake. I counted to 30, 40, 50, waiting for my legs to remember their purpose. When I finally climbed back up to the dining room, champagne forgotten, hands shaking, my brain was already assembling the nightmare. Table 1 by the glass wall, 1 at the entrance, 2 near the kitchen, 4th at the bar. When he toasts, I stepped onto the main floor and the world snapped into terrible focus. Table 1, corner position. Kang Tae-jun and Linda Zhang, Chicago's favorite power couple. He was Korean mob royalty, everyone knew it, even if the society pages called him an import-export businessman. She was old money, American elite, the kind whose family name opened doors that money alone couldn't touch. Their engagement had been in Chicago Magazine last month, photographed at some charity gala, all champagne and promises. A lie wrapped in a death sentence. I scanned the restaurant with new eyes, my order pad pressed against my chest like body armor. The man at the bar, late 30s, navy suit, nursing a bourbon he hadn't actually sipped in 20 minutes. He wasn't watching the hockey game on the overhead screen. He was watching Table 1. his hand resting too casually near his inside pocket. Near the kitchen pass, two men lingered by the host stand, menus open but never ordering, backs to the wall, eyes tracking movement patterns like predators timing an ambush. At the main entrance, a third figure in a server's uniform I didn't recognize. Someone who'd appeared in the last half hour and now stood exactly where he'd have a clear sightline to table 1. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I tasted copper. I looked back at Kang Tae-jun, laughing at something Linda said, completely unaware that the woman touching his arm had just orchestrated his execution. That in maybe 5 minutes, when dessert arrived and everyone was distracted by the tableside flambe, 4 guns would turn him into a headline. I could leave, fake a migraine, clock out, walk away, and let whatever was going to happen just happen. Men like Kang Tae-jun didn't end up in this world by accident. He'd made enemies. Maybe he'd earned this. But then I thought about my sister, Emma, studying for her nursing exams right now in our apartment on the South Side. I thought about the scholarship she'd lost when our mother got sick. I thought about the reason I was here in the first place, wearing this uniform, smiling at people who didn't see me, building a future one shift at a time. I thought about mercy no one deserves but everyone needs. I thought, I can't just watch someone die. So I grabbed the pen from my apron, clicked it open, and wrote 9 words on the torn corner of a guest check, words that would either save his life or end mine. Your fiancé sold you out. They're in position. My reflection in the wine glasses looked corpse pale as I picked up his whiskey refill and started walking. Each step felt like moving underwater, time stretching and contracting, reality breaking into hyper-detailed fragments. The scratch of polyester against my skin, the squeak of my non-slip shoes on marble, the sound of Linda's laugh, bright and brittle as breaking glass. Your whiskey, Mr. Kang. My voice came out steady, professional, like I hadn't just overheard a murder plot, like my hands weren't shaking hard enough to make the ice rattle. I set the crystal glass down on the white tablecloth with precision, the amber liquid catching candlelight like captured fire. And then I did the thing every server is trained never to do. I touched him. My fingers pressed against the back of his hand as I slid the folded paper beneath his drink coaster. The contact lasting maybe half a second, a violation of every rule, every invisible boundary between his world and mine. Kang Tae-jun's eyes locked onto mine, dark and sharp as obsidian blades. Before the bullets fly and loyalties shatter, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below. Would you risk your life for a stranger, or let fate take its course? Your choice shapes what comes next. Let's begin. The VIP pantry always felt like a tomb, all stainless steel and refrigerated silence, the kind of cold that sank into your bones and stayed there. I pushed through the heavy door, order ticket in hand, searching for the Dom Perignon that Table 7 had requested. The kind of champagne that cost more than my monthly rent, casually ordered like it was tap water. I moved between the glass shelves, my breath forming small clouds in the climate-controlled air. Cristal, Krug, Bollinger. The bottles glowed under the LED backlighting like liquid gold locked behind glass. I found the Dom on the 3rd shelf, my fingers just closing around the neck when I heard it. A voice. Female. Low. Speaking with the kind of precision that comes from giving orders you expect to be followed. The hitmen are in the service elevator. Do it when he toasts. My hand froze on the bottle. The voice was coming from the other side of the shelving unit, somewhere near the back storage alcove where we kept the reserve vintages. I should have coughed, announced myself, made noise. Instead, I stood there like a statue, every instinct screaming at me to move while my body refused to obey. One covering the main entrance, the voice continued, clinical and detached. 2 stationed near the kitchen pass. The 4th has the angle from the bar. It was English. American. No accent to hide behind. No foreign language to create distance from the violence she was orchestrating. Just clean, cold execution planning delivered in the same tone you'd use to arrange a dinner reservation. I recognized that voice. When he raises his glass, You'll have maybe 2 seconds before security reacts. Make them count. Linda Sheng. Through the gaps between champagne bottles, I could see her now, a sliver of cream silk, the flash of those emerald earrings catching the harsh pantry lighting. She stood with her back to me, phone pressed to her ear, one hand resting on her hip in a pose that suggested boredom rather than conspiracy. She was talking about murder the way other women talked about wedding seating charts. I don't care about the cleanup, she said, her voice dropping to something even colder. That's what you're being paid for. Just make sure it looks like a robbery gone wrong. Chicago's so violent these days. The way she said it, almost amused, like she was commenting on the weather, made my stomach turn. Heels clicked against concrete. She was moving toward the exit. I pressed myself flat against the shelving unit, praying the shadows and bottles would hide me, praying she wouldn't turn around, praying my hammering heart wasn't as loud as it felt. The champagne bottle in my hand had become a deadweight, my fingers cramping from holding it. She swept past, close enough that I caught her perfume, jasmine, and something darker, richer, expensive. Close enough that I could see the small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. She looked satisfied. The door swung shut behind her with a pneumatic hiss, sealing me back into the refrigerated silence. I stood there, lungs burning, realizing I'd been holding my breath. The cold air suddenly felt suffocating. My legs had turned to water. Linda Zhang had just ordered her fiancé's execution like she was confirming a catering order. And I was the only person in the world who knew. I stood at the service station, staring at the torn corner of a guest check like it might spontaneously combust in my hands. Your fiancé sold you out. They're in position. 9 words. 43 letters. A death sentence for me if I was wrong. A death sentence for him if I did nothing. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Around me, the skyline vault hummed with its usual symphony of wealth crystal singing against crystal. Muted laughter, the whisper of silk and cashmere, the soft jazz filtering through hidden speakers. Nobody noticed the waitress having a breakdown by the coffee station. Nobody ever noticed the waitresses. That invisibility had always felt like protection before. Tonight, it felt like a curse. I folded the paper into quarters, then eighths, making it small enough to hide under a coaster, small enough to be dismissed as trash if the wrong person saw it. My manager, Richard, swept past carrying a tray of champagne flutes, his cologne leaving a wake of bergamot and ambition. Rachel, table 1 needs a whiskey refresh. Move. Table 1. Of course. I picked up the crystal decanter of Glenfiddich, the good stuff they kept for VIP guests, and poured 2 fingers into a fresh glass. The amber liquid caught the light, warm and glowing, completely at odds with the ice spreading through my veins. The folded note felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my apron pocket. I could still walk away, throw the note in the trash, deliver the drink with a smile and let fate handle the rest. Men like Kang Tae-jun, they made choices that led them to moments like this. Maybe Linda had her reasons. Maybe he deserved whatever was coming. But then I saw him across the dining room, laughing at something Linda said, his hand reaching for hers across the white tablecloth. And I thought, he doesn't know. He thinks she loves him. That decided it. I placed the whiskey on a small tray, positioned the folded note beneath my thumb where I could feel its edges biting into my skin, and started walking. Each step felt like moving through concrete. Time fractured into hyper-aware fragments, the squeak of my non-slip shoes against marble, the scratch of polyester uniform against my skin, the way my pulse hammered in my throat so hard I thought everyone could see it. I forced myself to catalog the danger as I moved. The man at the bar, still nursing that same untouched bourbon, his eyes tracking the room with mechanical precision. The 2 men by the kitchen pass, menus still open, bodies angled like wolves waiting for the signal. The fake server at the entrance, hand hovering near his jacket. 4 assassins. 1 chance. Linda saw me first. Her eyes cold, green, beautiful and reptilian flicked up as I approached, assessing and dismissing me in the same breath. I was help. Furniture. Beneath. Notice. Her smile never wavered as she turned back to Taejun, her hand resting on his forearm in a gesture that would have looked tender if I didn't know she'd orchestrated his murder. And then I told the foundation director, she was saying, her voice honey-sweet, that if they wanted the donation, they'd have to rename the wing after your mother. It's only fitting. Taejun's expression softened at that, something almost vulnerable crossing his face. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. She raised a good man. Linda's thumb traced small circles on his wrist. I'm marrying him, after all. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stopped at the edge of their table, tray balanced perfectly, face arranged in the pleasant neutrality every server learns to weaponize. Your whiskey, Mr. Kang. My voice came out steady, professional, like I hadn't just overheard a murder plot. Like I wasn't about to commit what might be the stupidest act of my entire life. Taejun glanced up, and I got my first real look at him up close. The society photos didn't do him justice, or maybe they did him too much. He was handsome in that carved from marble way, all sharp angles and controlled danger, but his eyes were what caught me. Dark, intelligent, and tired in a way that expensive suits couldn't hide. Eyes that had seen too much, and expected even less. Thank you, he said absently, already turning back to Linda. This was it. I set the whiskey glass down on the white tablecloth with deliberate precision, the crystal making a soft clink against the table. And then I did the thing every server is trained never to do, the thing that violates every invisible boundary between their world and mine. I touched him. My fingers pressed against the back of his hand as I slid the folded paper beneath his drink coaster, the contact lasting maybe half a second. His skin was warm, the tendons in his hand tensing beneath my touch. Taejun's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and sudden, like a blade being unsheathed. For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Linda's hand stilled on his arm. The jazz went silent in my ears. Even the ambient chatter faded to white noise. His gaze held mine, questioning, dangerous, alert, and I realized he'd registered every wrong thing about this interaction. The touch, the tremor in my fingers, the way I couldn't quite control my breathing. I pulled my hand back slowly, carefully, like I was withdrawing from a wild animal. Enjoy your evening, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Then I turned and walked away, every instinct screaming at me to run while my legs insisted on maintaining the steady, professional pace expected of someone in a server's uniform. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Behind me, I heard the soft sound of paper unfolding, the clink of a glass being set down. Then silence, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath before an explosion. I made it 3 steps before I heard Linda's voice, bright and curious. Darling, what's that? And Kang Tae-jun's response, cold and lethal as a knife. Get down. The world exploded into chaos before I could take my 4th step. Glass shattered. Not the delicate tinkle of a dropped wine glass, but the violent percussion of bulletproof windows splintering under high-caliber assault. The floor-to-ceiling glass wall behind table once spider-webbed into 1,000 fractures, the city skyline beyond fragmenting into kaleidoscope pieces. Someone screamed. Then everyone was screaming. I spun around in time to see Taejun flip the table, the entire marble-topped monstrosity like it weighed nothing, sending crystal and china and that expensive whiskey flying through the air in a glittering arc. Linda stumbled backward, her emerald earrings catching the light as her face twisted from shock into something uglier, something that looked like rage mixed with fear. The fake waiter at the entrance drew his gun. Taejun was faster. His hand went to the small of his back, how had I not noticed the weapon, and came up with a matte black pistol that looked lethal and impossibly calm in his grip. 2 shots, controlled and precise, punched through the fake server's chest before the man's finger even found his trigger. The body hit the marble floor with a wet thud. That's when I learned what true panic felt like. People were diving under tables, overturning chairs, stampeding toward the emergency exits in a tidal wave of silk and terror. The man at the bar was moving now, gun drawn, using the panicked crowd as cover. The two men by the kitchen pass had separated, flanking wide, professional and coordinated. I stood frozen in the middle of the dining room like an idiot, my empty tray still clutched in my hands. Something whistled past my ear too close, too fast, and carved a chunk out of the decorative column behind me. A bullet. That was a bullet. My legs finally remembered how to work. I dropped the tray and ran. I made it maybe 5 feet before an arm hooked around my waist and yanked me sideways with enough force to knock the air from my lungs. I hit something solid, a body, a wall. I couldn't tell, and then I was being dragged backward, my feet scrambling for purchase on the blood-slicked marble. "Stay down," a voice growled in my ear. Taejun's voice. His arm locked across my chest like an iron bar, pulling me tight against him as he moved, using me as a shield, my body between him and the shooters. Terror ignited in my chest. He was using me as a human shield. More gunfire erupted, the sound deafening in the confined space. I felt Taejun's body jerk as he returned fire, his gun barking next to my ear loud enough to make my skull ring. Spent brass casings hit the floor like deadly rain, rolling across marble slick with spilled wine and blood. The man at the bar went down, his weapon clattering across the floor. 2 left. Taejun pivoted, taking me with him, and I realized with sick clarity why he'd grabbed me. I wasn't just a shield, I was an irregular shape, unpredictable, making him harder to target. The shooters couldn't get a clean angle without risking hitting me first. And apparently, whatever their orders were, they didn't include murdering random civilians. Small comfort when my heart was trying to hammer its way out of my rib cage. We moved as one unit, Taejun's arm locked around me, his gun tracking targets with mechanical precision. He shoved us behind the overturned marble table, our cover, our fortress, and I felt him tense, preparing for the next move. "The kitchen," he said, his breath hot against my ear. "When I move, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back." "I can't." "You will." One of the remaining shooters broke from cover, sprinting toward us with his weapon raised. Taejun's arm shifted, releasing me for half a second as he leaned around our cover and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The shooter's momentum carried him forward even as his body went limp, crashing into a table that collapsed under his weight. 1 left. Then I heard the distinct sound of a magazine being ejected, metal against metal, the tactical reload that meant Taejun's gun was empty. The last shooter heard it too. He emerged from behind the bar with predatory confidence, weapon raised, a smile curving his mouth as he took aim at Taejun's exposed position. Time crystallized into perfect, terrible clarity. I saw the shooter's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel line up with Taejun's head, saw the micro-expression of satisfaction cross the man's face. Instinct overrode terror. I grabbed the only weapon within reach, a champagne bottle from the shattered table service, Cristal or Dom Perignon. I couldn't tell, and hurled it with every ounce of strength I possessed. It hit the shooter square in the face. Glass exploded. Champagne sprayed. The man's head snapped back, his shot going wild, punching a hole in the ceiling and raining plaster dust down on all of us. Taejun moved like lightning. He closed the distance in 3 strides, weapon reloaded with movements too fast to track, and put 2 bullets in the shooter's chest before the man's finger left the trigger. Silence crashed over the restaurant like a physical weight. The only sounds were the distant wail of sirens, the quiet sobbing of survivors huddled under tables, and my own ragged breathing that sounded obscenely loud in the aftermath. Taejun stood in the center of the carnage, gun still raised, eyes scanning for threats that were no longer there. His charcoal suit was torn at the shoulder, blood, his or someone else's, I couldn't tell, darkening the expensive fabric. Then he turned to look at me. Really look at me. I was still crouched behind the overturned table, champagne-soaked and shaking, my server's uniform torn at the collar, my hands covered in someone else's blood. His eyes dropped to the champagne bottle I'd thrown, then back to my face. Something shifted in his expression recognition, calculation, understanding. You, he said, his voice rough. The note, that was you. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak, unable to do anything but stare at this man I'd just saved, who'd just saved me, who'd used me as a shield, and somehow we were both still alive. Taejun holstered his weapon and crossed the space between us in 2 strides. He reached down, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me to my feet with surprising gentleness. "You're coming with me," he said. "What?" "They saw you. They know you warned me." His grip tightened. Not painful, but unbreakable. "Linda knows, which means you're already dead if I leave you here." The sirens were getting closer. Taejun glanced toward the emergency exit, then back at me, his dark eyes unreadable. "So, I'm asking you once, and you have 5 seconds to decide. Do you want to live?" I looked at the bodies scattered across the marble floor, at Linda's empty chair where she'd vanished during the chaos, at the blood and broken glass and shattered remains of my normal life. "Yes," I whispered. "Then, run." And we did. The car was a black Mercedes that smelled like leather and gun oil and something darker I didn't want to identify. Taejun drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the pistol in his lap, his eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror for tales that never materialized. We'd left through the kitchen exit, past staff who'd pressed themselves against walls as we ran by, past the loading dock where deliveries arrived and secrets departed. No one stopped us. No one even looked at us directly, like witnessing something could make you complicit. Maybe it could. I sat in the passenger seat, still wearing my blood-spattered uniform, my hands folded in my lap to stop them from shaking. My phone had buzzed 17 times in my apron pocket. Emma, probably, wondering why I hadn't texted her after my shift. I didn't reach for it. What would I even say? "Hey, sis. Can't make rent this month because I'm on the run with a Mafia boss whose fiancée tried to kill him. Also, I think I'm an accessory to 4 murders. Love you." The city blurred past the windows Michigan Avenue, giving way to the Gold Coast. Then Lincoln Park, the neighborhoods getting progressively quieter, wealthier, more isolated. We drove for 40 minutes before Taejun finally turned onto a private road that wound through gates that opened automatically, through trees that had been positioned to hide rather than decorate. Then I saw it. The house, calling it a house, felt like calling the ocean a puddle rose from the landscape, like something carved from midnight itself. All obsidian glass and sharp angles, steel beams and darkness, a structure that looked like it could cut you if you touched it wrong. Floor to ceiling windows reflected nothing but shadows and the cold December moon. It was beautiful the way a blade was beautiful, deadly and precise. Taejun pulled into an underground garage that could have housed 20 vehicles but held only 5, each one more expensive than the last. The Mercedes slid into its space with a whisper, and the engine died, leaving us in silence so complete my ears rang with it. "Welcome to the fortress," Taejun said, his voice flat, exhausted. I followed him through a door that required both a keycard and a thumbprint, into an elevator with mirrored walls that showed me exactly how destroyed I looked. My uniform was torn and stained. My carefully pinned hair had come loose, falling in dark waves around my face. There was a bruise forming on my left cheekbone when had that happened, and my eyes looked haunted, hollow, like I'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. I looked like someone who'd watched people die. I looked like someone who'd helped kill them. The elevator opened directly into the main living space, and despite everything, despite the fear and the shock and the bone-deep exhaustion, I stopped breathing for a moment. The interior matched the exterior, all dark woods and polished concrete, leather furniture that probably cost more than my car, abstract art on the walls that I recognized from museum catalogs Emma used to leave around our apartment. But it was the windows that dominated everything. They stretched from floor to ceiling, wall to wall, offering a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline glittering in the distance like a galaxy you could almost touch. It was the kind of view that reminded you how small you were, how insignificant. Bathrooms down the hall. Second door, Taejun said, already moving toward what looked like a study, shrugging out of his ruined jacket. You'll find clothes in the guest room. They should fit well enough. Whose clothes? The question came out before I could stop it. He paused, glanced back. No one's. I have them for situations like this. Situations like this. Like kidnapping witnesses was a regular Tuesday for him. Maybe it was. I found the bathroom, calling it a bathroom, felt inadequate for what was essentially a spa and stood under water hot enough to burn, watching pink-tinged water swirl down the drain. Someone's blood. Maybe several someone's. I scrubbed until my skin turned raw, until I couldn't smell gun smoke anymore, until the shaking in my hands finally subsided to a manageable tremor. The guest room closet held options. Designer jeans, soft sweaters, silk pajamas, everything in neutrals and blacks, everything expensive and anonymous. I chose jeans and a cashmere sweater that felt like wearing a cloud, then stood in front of the mirror and tried to recognize the woman looking back. She looked like someone who belonged here. She looked like a stranger. I found Taejun in the study, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He'd showered too, his hair was wet, slicked back, and he'd changed into black slacks and a crisp white shirt that made him look less like a gangster and more like a CEO. Maybe there wasn't much difference. Your sister, he said without turning around. Emma, pre-nursing at UIC. Scholarship she lost when your mother got sick 3 years ago. You've been working doubles to cover her tuition. Ice flooded my veins. How do you... I know everything. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. Your apartment on the South Side. Your manager Richard who takes credit for your ideas. Your father in hospice care at Rush Medical. The $47,000 in medical debt you're drowning in. He paused. I know you're a good person, Rachel. That's why you warned me. The way he said my name, like he'd been saying it his whole life, sent a strange shiver down my spine. I also know, he continued, his voice dropping to something darker, that Linda knows your name, your face, where you live. By now, she's sent people to your apartment, to your sister's dorm, to anywhere you might run. Emma, the word came out strangled. You have to let me warn her. Already done. He pulled out his phone, showed me a text conversation. My people extracted her 20 minutes ago. She thinks she won a contest for a luxury hotel stay. She's safe. Scared, but safe. The relief that hit me was so intense I had to grab the back of a chair to stay upright. Why? I managed. Why help her? Why help me? Taejun set his whiskey down and crossed the space between us with those predatory strides that reminded me he was dangerous even when he was being kind. He stopped close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and something sharper. Because you saved my life when you had every reason to let me die, he said simply. Because you threw a champagne bottle at an armed assassin to protect a man you don't know. Because you're either the bravest or the stupidest person I've ever met, and I haven't decided which. Probably stupid, I whispered. Probably. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. But you're alive. Emma's alive. And as long as you're under my protection, you'll stay that way. His expression hardened. But understand this, Rachel, your old life is over. You can't go back to that apartment. That job. That version of yourself who was invisible and safe, the moment you handed me that note, you stepped into my world. I looked around the obsidian fortress, at the glittering city beyond the glass, at this dangerous man who held my life in his hands. Do I have a choice? Everyone has a choice. Taejun stepped back, giving me space. You can leave in the morning. I'll give you new papers, new identity. Enough money to start over somewhere far from Chicago. Or, he paused, his eyes searching mine. You can stay. Help me destroy the people who tried to kill me. Help me take back what Linda tried to steal. Why would you want my help? I'm just a waitress. No, he said softly. You're the woman who saw a conspiracy hidden in plain sight, who risked everything for a stranger, who saved my life twice in one night. His voice dropped to something almost reverent. You're exactly who I need. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered like broken promises. Inside this fortress of glass and shadows, I stood at a crossroads I'd never imagined I'd face. Behind me, poverty, invisibility, safety in being nobody. Ahead, danger, power, a life that would probably kill me. I thought about Emma, safe in a hotel she thought was a prize, about the restaurant floor I'd never walk again, about the woman I'd been just 8 hours ago, invisible and insignificant. I thought about the woman I might become. I'll stay, I said. But I have conditions. Taejun's smile was sharp as a knife. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Dawn broke over Chicago like a wound, all red and gold bleeding across the horizon. I'd slept maybe 3 hours on sheets that cost more than my monthly rent, in a bed so comfortable it felt obscene, and woke to the sound of Taejun's voice echoing through the obsidian halls. He was yelling in Korean, the words sharp and vicious, punctuated by the sound of something expensive shattering against a wall. I found him in his study, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand braced against the floor-to-ceiling window hard enough that his knuckles had gone white. The city sprawled below us, oblivious and glittering, while his empire apparently burned. I don't care what the banks are saying, he snarled into the phone, switching to English. Those accounts have secondary authorizations. Override them. A pause. What do you mean she changed the protocols? My stomach dropped. He listened for another moment, his jaw tightening with each passing second, then ended the call with enough force that I was surprised the phone survived. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring out at the city like he was planning which parts to burn first. Linda? I asked quietly from the doorway. Linda. He turned to face me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in him before, not fear, but something close to it. Uncertainty. She's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every account, every asset, every business holding she had herself added as a cosigner, a partner, a secondary authorization. Last night, she activated emergency protocols, claiming I'd been compromised, that there was a threat to the organization. How much? Everything. His laugh was bitter. She's frozen everything. The legitimate holdings, the shadow corporations, even the offshore accounts. I have maybe 6 weeks of liquid capital before this house becomes a very expensive prison. I stepped into the study, my bare feet silent on the polished concrete. She's trying to starve you out. She's trying to force a choice, bend the knee and accept her leadership, or watch everything I've built collapse. He poured himself a whiskey despite the early hour, drained it in one swallow. She's smarter than I gave her credit for, so we make her think she's won, I said. Taejun looked at me, one eyebrow raised. Explain. She thinks you're trapped here, cut off, hiding. She thinks I'm nobody, just a waitress who got lucky. I moved closer, the beginnings of a plan taking shape. She's right about one thing. I am nobody, which means I can go places you can't, see things you can't see. Rachel, you need information, right? You need to know who's still loyal, who flipped, what she's planning next. I held his gaze. I spent 3 years being invisible in rooms full of powerful people. I know how to blend in, how to listen, how to be exactly what people expect to see nothing. He studied me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating risks, weighing options, probably running through a dozen reasons why this was a terrible idea. It's dangerous, he finally said. Everything's dangerous now. I crossed my arms. You said you needed my help. Let me help. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. What do you need? A target. Someone in Linda's circle who talks too much. Someone who might let something slip to the hired help. Tae-jun moved to his desk, pulled up a tablet, scrolled through images until he found what he was looking for. Marcus Wei. He's been Linda's accountant for 5 years, handles the money she inherited from her father. If she's moving assets, consolidating power, he'll know about it. He showed me the photo, a middle-aged man with soft features and expensive glasses. He lunches at Park Tavern every Tuesday. Same table, same time. 12:30. Today's Tuesday. Yes. I looked down at myself, borrowed jeans, cashmere sweater, looking like someone who belonged in a mansion rather than serving in one. I'll need my uniform. The one from last night. It's evidence of a crime scene. Exactly. It's authentic. I smiled without humor. Trust me, people don't look twice at a waitress. 4 hours later, I stood outside Park Tavern wearing my cleaned and pressed uniform. The blood had come out surprisingly well with my hair pinned back and my expression carefully neutral. The restaurant was upscale, casual, the kind of place where lawyers and bankers discussed deals over organic salads and imported beer. I'd called ahead, using a fake catering service name, claiming to be looking for part-time work. The manager, desperate and understaffed, had told me to come by during lunch rush. Perfect. I pushed through the door, spotted Marcus Way immediately corner booth, already nursing a martini, his tablet open in front of him, and made my way to the manager's office. 20 minutes later, I was carrying a tray of waters and bread baskets, just another faceless server in a sea of service industry workers. Nobody looked at me. Nobody ever did. Marcus Way's table was in my section. I approached with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, set down his water, smiled the smile that made me disappear. "Can I start you with an appetizer?" "Calamari," he said without looking up from his tablet. "And another martini." "Of course." I moved away, but not too far. The trick to gathering information wasn't standing close enough to obviously eavesdrop, it was being close enough that people forgot you existed. I bussed tables nearby, folded napkins, all while keeping my ears tuned to Way's conversation as another man joined him. "Finalizing the transfers by Friday," Way was saying, his voice low but not quite low enough. "Once the liquidity is established, she'll have complete operational control. And Kang? Dead or irrelevant, according to Linda. She's already positioning his death as a tragic mob hit. The board meeting is Thursday." My hands stilled on the water pitcher. "Who's backing her?" "The Italians, naturally. Her father's old connections. But also someone new. She's been taking meetings with someone she calls the architect. I haven't seen him, but the money flowing in from that direction is substantial. The architect. A new player." I filed that away, moved closer with the pretense of refilling water glasses at the adjacent table. "She's hosting something at the estate tomorrow night," Wei continued. "Private. Just the inner circle. That's when she'll make the official announcement that she's assuming control of the Kang territories. Tomorrow night. Less than 48 hours. Wei's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to something nervous. "I have to go. She's calling." He stood, threw cash on the table without waiting for his food, and left in a hurry that spoke of fear poorly hidden. I cleared his table slowly, methodically, and palmed the napkin he'd been writing on numbers, account codes, something that looked like a password. Then I walked out through the kitchen, stripped off my uniform in the bathroom, and emerged in the jeans and jacket I'd worn underneath. By the time anyone noticed the extra server had vanished, I was already 3 blocks away, dialing Taejun's number. "Talk to me," he answered immediately. "She's moving faster than you thought. Board meeting Thursday. She's hosting something tomorrow night at an estate, I'm guessing hers, and there's someone new in play. Someone she calls the architect." Silence on the other end, heavy with implications. "The architect," he repeated, his voice gone cold. "That's not good. Who is he?" "Not he. She." Taejun exhaled slowly. "If Linda's made contact with the architect, this is bigger than I thought. Much bigger. Then we need to move faster." I ducked into an alley, my heart hammering. That event tomorrow night, that's our window. That's when everyone will be in one place. Distracted. Confident. You want to infiltrate it. I want to end it. I surprised myself with the venom in my voice. She tried to kill you. She threatened my sister. She destroyed your life and mine in one move. I took a breath. So yes, I want to infiltrate it, and I want to watch her world burn. Through the phone, I heard Tae-jun's dark laugh, approving and dangerous. Welcome to the war, Rachel, he said. Let's teach her what happens when you underestimate the invisible. The basement of Tae-jun's obsidian fortress was nothing like the luxury above. Down here, everything was concrete and steel, fluorescent lights and the smell of gun oil and sweat. A shooting range, a weapons cache, a training facility that looked like it could prepare someone for war. Maybe that's exactly what we were doing. You did well today, Tae-jun said, standing in the center of the space. His shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories he'd never shared. But information without context is just noise. You need to understand what you're walking into. I stood across from him, still buzzing with adrenaline from the Park Tavern operation, my hands restless at my sides. So teach me! He moved to a wall covered in photographs, documents, red string connecting names and faces in a conspiracy web that looked like something from a crime thriller. Except this was real. This was my life now. Linda's not working alone, he began, tapping a photo of a silver-haired woman I didn't recognize. This is the architect Catherine Volkov, former KGB, now a freelance power broker who specializes in hostile takeovers. If Linda hired her, it means this was planned years in advance. Why would Linda need outside help? She had access to everything, because I would have seen her coming. Tae-jun's jaw tightened, but Volkov knows how to hide in plain sight. She knows how to make betrayal look like love. He turned to face me. She's also the most dangerous person you'll ever meet. If you see her tomorrow night, you run. I don't run, Rachel. I don't run, I repeated, holding his gaze. Not anymore. You said you needed me, so teach me what I need to know. Something flickered in his eyes, approval mixed with concern, attraction mixed with fear. He'd been careful not to stand too close since I'd arrived, maintaining distance like it was a tactical decision. Tonight, that distance felt like a lie. He crossed to a table covered in blueprints. Linda's estate. 40 rooms, 20 acres, security that rivals Fort Knox. Tomorrow night, she'll have 50 people there, allies, potential recruits, people she's trying to impress. His finger traced the layout. You'll enter as catering staff. I've already arranged the placement. You'll have maybe 2 hours to move through the house, find Volkov, and plant these. He handed me 3 devices the size of quarters. Audio surveillance, military grade. Place them in her study, her private salon, and the main conference room. And if I'm caught, you won't be. His voice was absolute certainty. Because I'm going to teach you how to be a ghost. For the next 3 hours, he put me through scenarios that felt like interrogations disguised as lessons. How to read a room in 30 seconds. How to identify security personnel versus guests. How to move through a space like you belonged there. How to lie so convincingly that even you believed it. The key, he said, circling me as I practiced maintaining a neutral expression, is that you already know how to be invisible. Now you just need to weaponize it. I've been doing that my whole life. No, you've been surviving. There's a difference. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Surviving is passive. What I'm teaching you is active, deliberate. You choose to be invisible, which means you can choose when to be seen. His proximity was doing dangerous things to my focus. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and smoke, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the weight of his attention like a physical touch. Show me how to choose, I said, my voice coming out lower than intended. Something dangerous flashed across his face. You need to understand something, Rachel. In my world, showing emotion is showing weakness. The moment you let someone see what matters to you, they can use it against you. He reached out, his fingers ghosting along my jaw, not quite touching. Linda knew I cared about her. That's why she could get close enough to destroy me. I'm not Linda. No, you're something much more dangerous. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, the touch feather light but electric. You're someone I actually trust. The air between us felt charged, heavy with everything unspoken. I should step back, should maintain the professional distance that kept this partnership from becoming something messier, more complicated. Instead, I leaned in. Trust is the deadliest weapon, I whispered, echoing something he'd said earlier. Yes. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer with a control that suggested he was used to restraining himself. Which is why this is a terrible idea. Which part? The trust or the... He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was consuming. Desperate. The kind of kiss that tasted like danger and felt like falling. His hand slid into my hair, angling my head as he deepened the kiss, and I responded with equal hunger, my fingers clutching his shirt like it was the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. We broke apart, breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine, his hands still tangled in my hair. We can't do this, he said, but he didn't let go. I know. You're under my protection. There's a power imbalance. I chose to stay. I chose this. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Don't take my agency away by deciding what I can and can't want. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And I saw him warring with himself, desire versus duty, want versus what he thought was right. Tomorrow night, he finally said, his voice rough. When you're in that house, surrounded by people who would kill you without hesitation, you need to be completely focused. No distractions, no divided attention. I know. Which means this, he gestured between us. Whatever this is, it waits until after, until you're safe. And if I'm not safe, if something goes wrong, his hands tightened on my waist, his eyes going dark with something that looked like fear. Nothing will go wrong. I won't let it. You can't control everything, Taejun. Watch me. He stepped back, creating distance that felt like loss, his expression shifting back to the controlled mask he wore like armor. We have 12 hours before the event. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, you become someone else. I watched him walk toward the stairs, his shoulders tense, his movements controlled. Taejun? He paused, glanced back. Knowledge isn't the deadliest weapon, I said softly. Having something to lose is. His expression flickered recognition, agreement, fear. Yes, he said quietly. That's what I'm afraid of. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the training room with the taste of him still on my lips and the weight of tomorrow pressing down like a physical thing. I touched my mouth, still feeling the ghost of his kiss, and thought about what he'd taught me tonight. Not just the technical skills, the surveillance placement, the room reading, but the most important lesson. In Taejun's world, caring about someone was the greatest vulnerability. And I was starting to care about him far more than was safe for either of us. Tomorrow night, I'd walk into Linda's estate wearing someone else's face, carrying devices that could bring down an empire, with knowledge that could get me killed. But the most dangerous thing I'd be carrying was the realization that I was falling for a man I might have to watch die. Again. The Zhang estate looked like something out of a Gothic fairy tale, all stone and ivy and wrought iron gates, perched on 10 acres of manicured perfection overlooking Lake Michigan. As our catering van pulled through the service entrance, I caught glimpses of the main house through the trees. Limestone walls, arched windows glowing with warm light, a fountain in the circular drive where water nymphs poured endless streams from marble urns. It was beautiful the way mausoleums were beautiful, cold and final. Remember, Taejun's voice crackled through the nearly invisible earpiece he'd fitted me with that morning. You're just another member of the catering staff. You belong there. Believe it. And they will too. I touched the device reflexively, hidden beneath the fall of my hair. I've got this. I know you do. A pause, heavy with everything we hadn't said since last night. Rachel, don't. I cut him off gently. Not now. After. After. Such a fragile word to build hope on. The van pulled into the service bay where 3 other catering vehicles had already unloaded. Staff in black and white uniforms moved with choreographed efficiency, carrying trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than most people's car payments. I stepped out, adjusted my uniform identical to theirs, down to the gold name tag that read Emily, and grabbed a tray of smoked salmon canapes from the staging area. Just another invisible worker in a sea of hired help. Perfect. The estate's interior was exactly what I'd expected, old money dressed in new taste. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that belonged in museums hanging casually on silk-papered walls. But it was the ballroom that took my breath away. The space had been transformed into something between a coronation hall and a funeral. Black and gold, everything drapes, flowers, table settings, creating an atmosphere that felt both celebratory and mourning. A stage had been erected at the far end, draped in black velvet, with a single podium spotlit like an altar. Linda's throne. I counted 50 guests as I circulated with my tray, memorizing faces, categorizing threats, politicians I recognized from news broadcasts, business moguls whose net worth had their own Wikipedia pages, and scattered throughout, men and women who moved with the predatory grace of professional killers dressed in evening wear. Linda's new army. Champagne? I offered to a cluster of men in Italian suits, my voice pitched to that perfect service industry neutrality. They took glasses without looking at me, continuing their conversation in rapid Italian. I caught fragments, consolidation, territory, the transition of power before moving on. I spotted Marcus Way near the bar, looking nervous in a way that suggested he knew how expendable he was. And there, near the stage, conferring with Linda herself, was a woman I recognized from Taejun's briefing photos. Catherine Volkov, the architect. She was smaller than I'd expected. Maybe 50, with silver hair styled in a severe bob and a black dress that probably cost more than a semester of Emma's tuition. But it was her eyes that gave her away cold, calculating. The eyes of someone who viewed people as pieces on a chessboard. Eyes on the architect, I murmured, angling my head so the microphone would catch it. Northeast corner, talking to Linda. Copy. Taejun's voice was tight. Plant the first device and move away from them. I drifted toward the private salon off the main ballroom, smiling at a security guard who barely glanced at me as I passed. The salon was empty, all leather furniture and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A room designed for deals and deceptions. I set my tray down, reached into my pocket for the first surveillance device, and pressed it beneath the lip of the conference table in the center of the room. It adhered with a soft click, invisible unless you knew where to look. One down, I whispered. Back in the ballroom, the lights were dimming. Linda was mounting the stage, her black Valentino gown glittering with what looked like crushed diamonds. Her hair swept up to reveal those emerald earrings that I'd last seen glittering by candlelight while she ordered her fiancé's murder. She looked radiant, triumphant. She looked like a queen ascending her throne. The room fell silent as she approached the podium, all 50 guests turning to face her like flowers following the sun. I positioned myself near the kitchen entrance, tray balanced, just another server waiting to refill glasses. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Linda began, her voice carrying through the space with practiced ease. I know this week has been difficult, shocking, the loss of someone we all cared for. She paused, her expression shifting to something that might have been grief if I didn't know it was performance. Kang Tae-jun was a visionary, a leader, the man I loved. Her voice caught perfectly, a single tear sliding down her cheek that caught the spotlight like a diamond. 2 nights ago, he was taken from us in a senseless act of violence. A restaurant shooting. Wrong place, wrong time. The kind of tragedy that reminds us how fragile life is. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. I tightened my grip on the tray to keep my hands from shaking with rage. But Taejun wouldn't want us to crumble in his absence, Linda continued, her voice strengthening. He built an empire on the principle that power serves those strong enough to wield it. And so, in his memory, in his honor, I'm here to announce that I will be assuming leadership of all Kang operations, effective immediately. She paused, letting the words settle, her gaze sweeping the room with the confidence of someone who'd already secured every vote. This is not a coup. This is continuity. Taejun and I built this together. He would want it in the hands of someone who loved him, someone who understands his vision. Her smile was soft, sad, perfectly calibrated. Someone who can lead us into the future he dreamed of. Applause erupted, genuine from some, obligatory from others, but universal in its message. They were accepting her claim. Catherine Volkov stepped onto the stage, joining Linda at the podium. "I'd like to add," she said, her accent subtle but unmistakable Russian undertones wrapped in British boarding school polish, that Miss Zhang has demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking this organization needs. In the coming weeks, we'll be restructuring operations, consolidating territories, and eliminating, she paused meaningfully, redundancies, eliminating anyone still loyal to Taejun. But tonight, Linda reclaimed the microphone, her expression brightening. Tonight is about celebration, about new beginnings, about the future we're going to build together. She raised a champagne flute that had been waiting on the podium. To Taejun's memory, and to the empire he left behind. To the empire, the crowd echoed, glasses rising in unison. I watched Linda drink, watched her smile, watched her bask in the adoration of 50 people who thought she'd won. "Second device," Taejun's voice reminded me through the earpiece. I slipped toward the main conference room, my heart hammering against my ribs, Linda's words echoing in my head. The man I loved, taken from us, his memory. She was erasing him, rewriting history, turning his murder into martyrdom she could profit from. The conference room was empty, all the guests still absorbed in Linda's performance. I planted the second device beneath the head of the table, my fingers trembling slightly as it clicked into place. 2 down, moving to the study. The study was on the second floor, past security I shouldn't have been able to bypass. But Taejun had planned for this, a service staircase, a shift change at exactly 9:15:30 seconds where no one would be watching. I climbed the stairs like I belonged there, carrying a tray of empty glasses as my excuse, and found the study at the end of a hallway lined with portraits of Zhang family patriarchs who all shared Linda's cold, calculating eyes. The door was unlocked. Arrogant. Inside, the study was all dark wood and leather, a room designed for men who moved empires with phone calls. I planted the third device under the desk, my hands steadier now, adrenaline giving way to something colder, more focused. 3 down. I'm coming out. Rachel. Taejun's voice had changed, gone urgent. Volkov just left the ballroom. She's heading upstairs. My blood turned to ice. Footsteps in the hallway, heels clicking against hardwood, purposeful and approaching. I looked around the study, no other exit, no window, no closet large enough to hide in. Just me, a tray of glasses, and about 5 seconds before Catherine Volkov, the most dangerous woman in Chicago, walked through that door and found me somewhere I had absolutely no reason to be. "Taejun," I whispered. "I'm trapped." Catherine Volkov's footsteps stopped outside the study door. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a decision that would either save my life or end it. The tray of glasses in my hands suddenly felt like the most absurd prop imaginable. What catering staff wandered into private studies on the second floor? The door handle began to turn. I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up the study phone and started speaking into it, my voice pitched loud enough to carry through the door. "Yes, I understand the dietary restrictions. No shellfish for table 7. I'll inform the kitchen immediately. The door opened. Volkov stood in the doorway, her silver hair catching the light, her expression one of mild irritation that could turn lethal in a heartbeat. She was smaller than I'd imagined, but her presence filled the room like a cold front. "Who are you?" Her accent was precise, clipped, dangerous. I covered the phone receiver with my hand, arranging my face into apologetic embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." The phone lines downstairs were all busy, and we had an urgent allergen situation. I was told this room was available for staff use. Her eyes, pale gray, unnervingly sharp, studied me with the kind of attention that felt like being dissected. I kept my expression neutral, subservient, everything a catering staff member should be when caught somewhere they shouldn't. "Get out," she said finally, dismissing me with a wave that suggested I was already forgotten. "Of course. Again, my apologies." I hung up the phone, grabbed my tray, and moved toward the door with the perfect pace of someone chastened but not afraid. As I passed her, her hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Wait. My heart stopped. She leaned in, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp, like winter roses. "You look familiar. Have we met?" "I don't think so, ma'am. I work for Elite Catering. We handle events all over the city." Her grip tightened for another moment, her eyes searching my face for something I prayed she wouldn't find. Then she released me, stepping back. "Be more careful where you make your phone calls." "Yes, ma'am." I walked away with measured steps, feeling her gaze boring into my back until I turned the corner. Only then did I allow myself to breathe, my hand trembling so badly the glasses rattled on the tray. "That was too close," Taejun's voice said through the earpiece, tight with concern. But it worked. I descended the service staircase, my legs steady despite the adrenaline crash. "All 3 devices are planted. What now?" "Now you get out. The van leaves in 10 minutes. Be on it." But as I reached the ground floor, I heard Linda's voice echoing from the ballroom, addressing the crowd again. Something in her tone made me pause. "Before we conclude tonight's celebration," Linda was saying, "I have one final announcement, a surprise that I think will cement our new direction." I drifted closer to the ballroom entrance, hidden in the shadows of the corridor. Linda stood on stage beside a covered object about 6 feet tall, draped in black velvet. As you know, Taejun was a collector of fine art, but his most prized possession was something he commissioned himself, a portrait meant to commemorate our engagement. She pulled the velvet away with theatrical flourish. The portrait beneath was stunning. Taejun and Linda rendered in oil paint, dressed in formal attire, looking like the perfect power couple. But it was hung in a heavy gilt frame with a brass plaque at the bottom that made my blood run cold. Kang Taejun, beloved leader, 1990 to 2025. "I wanted you all to see this," Linda continued, her voice thick with manufactured emotion, "because it represents everything we're honoring tonight. His legacy, his vision, his—" The lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the ballroom for 3 seconds that felt like eternity. Then emergency lighting kicked in, dim and red-tinged, casting everything in hellish shadows. And in that crimson glow, a figure appeared in the main entrance. Taejun. He stood silhouetted in the doorway, wearing a black suit that looked like it had been tailored by darkness itself, his presence radiating controlled violence. Behind him, I could see shapes moving, his men, loyal soldiers who hadn't abandoned him, who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. The room fell into stunned silence. Linda's face went through a sequence of expressions so fast they blurred shock, fear, rage, and finally, something like resignation. Beside her, Catherine Volkov's hand moved toward her clutch purse with predatory smoothness. "I'm disappointed, Linda," Taejun said, his voice carrying through the space with lethal calm as he walked down the center aisle. "You went to all this trouble to plan my funeral, and you didn't even wait to confirm I was dead." "Taejun," Linda started, but he held up a hand, silencing her. Did you really think a restaurant ambush would be enough? He continued walking, each step measured, purposeful. Did you think I'd built an empire without contingencies? Without people loyal enough to die for me? He reached the stage, mounted it with fluid grace, and stood facing the portrait of his own memorial. For a moment, he just looked at it, his expression unreadable. Then he ripped it from the wall and threw it to the floor. The frame shattered, glass exploding across the polished wood, the painted canvas tearing down the middle, severing his image from Linda's. "You wanted to erase me," he said, turning to face her. "You wanted to take everything I built and remake it in your image, with your architect pulling the strings." His eyes found Volkov. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice Catherine Volkov's fingerprints all over this? That I wouldn't recognize her signature move, the long game, the patient betrayal, the financial strangulation?" Volkov's expression remained neutral, but I saw calculation flickering behind those cold eyes. "This empire," Taejun continued, his voice dropping to something more dangerous, "was built on loyalty, on trust, on the understanding that betrayal has consequences." He looked back at Linda. "You taught me an important lesson. Never love someone more than you love survival." Linda's composure cracked. "You don't understand. I did this for us. The old ways were dying. We needed to evolve. To murder me and steal my legacy?" His laugh was bitter. How progressive. Security was moving now. Linda's new guards positioning themselves around the stage. But Taejun's men had already formed a perimeter, weapons drawn but not raised, creating a Mexican standoff in evening wear. "Here's what's going to happen," Taejun said, addressing the entire room. "Everyone who pledged loyalty to Linda tonight has a choice. Reaffirm your allegiance to me or leave Chicago. You have 24 hours. "You can't," Linda started. "I can. I did. And I have proof." He pulled out a phone, and suddenly the screens around the ballroom installed for Linda's presentation flickered to life. Audio played through the speakers. Linda's voice crystal clear. "The hitmen are in the service elevator. Do it when he toasts." Then video security footage from the restaurant, showing Linda leaving moments before the shooting started. Then financial records, transfers, authorizations, her systematic theft of his assets. Everything. All of it. Played for 50 witnesses who'd come here to celebrate her coronation and were now watching her execution. "Rachel," Taejun said suddenly, his eyes finding me in the shadows near the entrance. "Come here." My heart stopped. Every eye in the room turned to look at me, still in my catering uniform, still holding my tray, still playing the role of invisible help. I set the tray down and walked toward the stage. "This woman," Taejun said as I climbed the steps to stand beside him, "saved my life when she had every reason to let me die. She risked everything, her safety, her future, her sister's life, to warn a stranger about a conspiracy she'd accidentally uncovered." He turned to face me, and in his eyes, I saw everything we hadn't said last night, everything we'd pushed aside for after. "She's braver than half the men in this room, smarter than most, and loyal in a way you'll never understand, Linda, because you don't know what that word means." His hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that felt like a declaration. "So I'm making this very simple. Rachel stays, Linda goes. And anyone who has a problem with that can join her in exile." The room held its breath. Then, one by one, guests began moving, some toward the exits, abandoning Linda's sinking ship, others stepping forward to kneel in the old sign of allegiance to Taejun. The coronation Linda had planned became his restoration, and I stood beside him, no longer invisible, no longer insignificant, no longer the waitress who served while others lived. I stood beside him as his equal, his partner, his queen. The reckoning came swiftly. Linda stood on the stage, isolated in the crimson emergency lighting, watching her carefully constructed empire crumble around her. The guests who'd toasted her ascension moments ago now avoided her gaze, some already slipping toward exits, others kneeling before Taejun in gestures of renewed loyalty. Catherine Volkov remained motionless, her pale eyes calculating angles, always calculating. She was the kind of woman who survived by knowing when to abandon a sinking ship. "Catherine," Taejun said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had never really left him. "You and I need to have a conversation. In private." Volkov's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "I believe we do." She descended from the stage with the grace of someone who'd walked away from far worse disasters, following Taejun toward the study. As they passed me, she paused, her eyes meeting mine with something like recognition. "The phone call," she murmured. "You weren't calling about allergies." "No," I said simply. "Clever girl." There was no malice in her voice, only professional appreciation. "You'll do well in this world, if you survive it." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with Linda. Linda's mask had completely shattered. Her perfect composure, her calculated grief, her triumphant smile, all of it stripped away to reveal something raw and desperate beneath. "You," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "A fucking waitress. You destroyed everything." "No," I corrected quietly. "You destroyed everything when you decided murder was easier than divorce." She lunged at me. I'd like to say I was ready, that Taejun's training kicked in and I defended myself with practiced ease. The truth was messier. We collided in a tangle of silk and fury, her nails raking across my cheek as I grabbed her wrists, both of us crashing into the shattered portrait frame. Glass cut into my palms. Linda's emerald earring caught in my hair. We struggled like animals, all elegance abandoned, until hands pulled us apart. Taejun's men, their grips firm but not cruel. "Enough," one of them said, hauling Linda backward. She fought against them, her hair coming loose from its elegant updo, mascara streaking her face like war paint. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" She turned her venom on Taejun, who'd returned from the study. "I loved you. Everything I did because you were too weak to do what needed to be done." "You loved my empire," Taejun corrected coldly. "I was just the obstacle standing between you and it." "So what now?" Linda spat. "You kill me? Make me disappear? Prove you're exactly the monster everyone says you are?" "No." Taejun's voice was calm, final. "I do something worse. I let you live." Her expression flickered with confusion. "You wanted power, Linda. You wanted to be seen as a leader, a visionary, someone who built empires." He gestured to the room, to the guests who wouldn't meet her eyes. "Now everyone knows what you really are. A traitor, a murderer, someone who couldn't earn loyalty so she tried to steal it." He nodded to his men. "Put her on a plane to Moscow. Volkov has agreed to take her on as a project. I'm sure Catherine will find uses for someone with Linda's particular skill set." The blood drained from Linda's face. Moscow, under Volkov's control. A fate worse than death for someone who'd craved independence and power. "Taejun, please." "You're already dead to me," he said simply. "Everything else is just geography." They dragged her away, her protests fading as she disappeared into the night she'd tried to orchestrate for him. The ballroom slowly emptied. Guests departed with murmured apologies and renewed pledges of loyalty. Staff cleared debris with practiced efficiency. Within an hour, the Zhang estate stood nearly empty. The evidence of tonight's drama reduced to shattered glass and the ghost of Linda's ambition. Taejun found me on the second-floor balcony, staring out at Lake Michigan stretching dark and infinite toward the horizon. Chicago glittered to our left, all lights and promises and possibilities. "Your cheek," he said softly, his fingers ghosting over the scratches Linda had left. "Badges of honor." I tried to smile, but exhaustion was catching up to me. Is Volkov really taking her? Catherine collects broken tools and reshapes them into weapons. Linda will spend years as an asset, doing work far beneath what she imagined for herself. He leaned against the railing beside me. "It's a mercy, actually, more than she deserved." "And Emma?" "Safe." My people are bringing her to the estate tomorrow. She thinks she's meeting her sister's new employer. His lips quirked. Which is technically true. I laughed, the sound surprising me. After everything, the violence, the fear, the deaths, I was laughing on a balcony overlooking an empire I'd helped reclaim. What happens now? I asked. Taejun was quiet for a moment, his profile sharp against the night sky. I need to rebuild. Linda did more damage than I want to admit. She turned allies into enemies, froze assets, created doubt where there should have been certainty. He turned to face me. It's going to take time. Strategy. Someone who understands how to see patterns others miss. Someone invisible when she needs to be, I added, and undeniable when she chooses to be seen. His hand found mine, warm and solid. I meant what I said in there. You're not my employee. You're not under my protection as some kind of charity. Then what am I? He pulled me closer, his other hand cupping my face with surprising gentleness. My partner, my equal. The woman who saved my life and then helped me reclaim it. His thumb traced my jawline. The woman I'm falling in love with, if we're being honest. My breath caught. Taejun, you don't have to say it back. This world I'm offering you, it's dangerous. Complicated. Nothing like the life you planned. His eyes searched mine. But it's yours if you want it. Not as my queen, not as my possession, but as yourself. Rachel. The woman who's too stubborn to stay invisible. I thought about the waitress I'd been a week ago. The girl who kept her head down. Who survived by being nobody. The woman who'd stood in a wine cellar and heard murder being planned and chose against all logic, against all self-preservation to act. That woman had never really been invisible. She'd been waiting. I want it, I said. All of it. The danger, the complexity, the empire we're going to build. I pulled him closer. And I want you. He kissed me like he'd been holding back forever, like tonight had proven we might not get tomorrow. Like I was the most valuable thing he'd ever possessed and the only thing he'd never try to own. When we broke apart, the city lights reflecting in his eyes, he smiled a real smile, rare and beautiful. Then welcome to the rain, Rachel. I looked out at Chicago sprawling beneath us, at the empire that had almost fallen, at the world I'd stepped into when I'd written 9 words on a torn receipt. Your fiancé sold you out. They're in position. Those words had changed everything. And standing here, on this balcony, with Taejun's hand in mine and the future spreading out like the dark water of the lake, I realized something. I'd spent my whole life trying to be invisible because I thought that's what survival looked like. But I'd been wrong. Survival was this choosing to be seen, choosing to fight, choosing to build something with someone who saw you as you really were and valued you for it. I wasn't a waitress anymore. I wasn't a ghost. I was Rachel, partner to a kingpin, architect of a coup, the woman who'd toppled a conspiracy with champagne bottles and courage and 3 surveillance devices the size of quarters. I was exactly who I'd always been. I just hadn't been looking. What are you thinking? Taejun asked. I smiled, leaning into him as the Chicago wind swept across the balcony, carrying the scent of winter and change and new beginnings. I'm thinking, I said, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and for the first time in my life, I meant it.